Well, joining us now is Zeke Miller, Deputy Washington Bureau Chief at the Associated Press, to talk more about this shutdown ending. Zeke, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so federal government shutdowns don't usually leave an economic damage, but the Congressional Budget Office is projecting about $11 billion in permanent loss this time. We know this one was long, the longest so far in history, but what else makes it different? Why are we seeing such a loss here?
It's the length of time, but also the cascade of impacts that we saw, in part because of the duration there. The airlines, as you were just referencing, it's going to take, we know it's going to take those airlines, in some cases, potentially weeks to get back to sort of full strength and the same level of operations that they were before the shutdown starts. That has a ripple effect on the economy. The same with the sort of the decrease in people's spending, as whether they be federal workers who were who didn't have pay and maybe tapped into some savings that they're now going to replenish. Yes, some of it is moving money from that they would have spent last month into this month, or vice versa. But it does have a broader impact when it went on for that long. That's really the distinguishing feature of this shutdown.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to Democrats, they did not get their key demand. It was the health insurance subsidies that is set to expire next month. So what's the path forward on this? Do you think this is even possible, or could actually happen?
It is certainly possible that they did win a sort of a handshake agreement from Senate Republicans, at least in that chamber, to get a vote on the bill of their choosing next month. What we do know is that there is certainly pressure on everyone in Washington to figure out some pathway forward on these skyrocketing healthcare premiums that are being faced by the millions of people who are on those Obamacare exchanges as these subsidies are expiring. We've seen comments from President Donald Trump suggesting that he is noticing this as a political issue for himself and his party. Is it possible that there is going to be consensus? Yes. Could this also just become the latest cudgel as lawmakers in Washington prepare for the November 2026 midterm elections and nothing gets done? They argue about it for the next year. That is also very possible as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because there is more funding to be done. There were some, of course, long-term agreements, but there's a chunk of the funding that's only extended until January. I think everyone's wondering, do we just see this again in January?
It's absolutely possible. There is a bit of motivation among sort of the budget-minded lawmakers on Capitol Hill to sort of buckle down on these appropriations bills, these very technical spending bills, and to get those out the door before the end of January. That's plausible, but what really ends up holding them up is consensus on some of these very thorny issues. And Democrats have essentially shown that they have a bit of a pain point if they want to hold the line on government spending, that they can potentially extract some concessions out of the administration. And depending on how big of an issue this healthcare subsidies price hike will be for the American public in the next month or so, that could really determine what the end of January looks like.
Yeah, and when it comes to this shutdown, there's been the blame game on both sides. But we actually have an AP NORC poll. It found that 6 in 10 Americans say Trumps and Republicans in Congress have a great deal or quite a bit of responsibility for the shutdown. But it also goes on to say about 54% say the same about Democrats. So what does this blame game say about trust in the government right now?
I think, you laid it out plainly right there. Nobody in Washington really gets high marks at all. Everyone has a piece of the responsibility here. Certainly the party in power in Washington, and Republicans do have unified control of Washington, will likely get more. We've seen that in shutdowns past. That's sort of the pattern there. But Democrats don't get off scot-free either, and that maybe explains why we saw a couple of nights ago as some of the Senate Democrats sort of the moderate Senate Democrats reached across the aisle and came out with this bipartisan package to get the government reopened, to some consternation from their base on the left. They're seeing the political tea leaves here. At a certain point, the American public doesn't really care who's in charge. They they want the government open.
And no one really cares until it affects them as well. So We'll have to see if this handshake agreement goes forward. Thank you so much, Zeke. We really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.